Yes, ma'am. Yes. I was just starting. I think we'll begin.
Hi, Mr. Srinivasan. Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you joining today's session on quality risk management, lab to patient. I would like to begin by introducing our moderator for today, Dr. Shohini Ghosh. Dr. Ghosh is a global executive MBA alumna and topper of the batch of 22 and had a long stint in pharma working in the R&D center at Torrent Pharmaceuticals Limited before joining Ahmedabad University, where she is currently Director, Administration and Chief of Staff to the Office of the Vice Chancellor. Thank you for moderating the conversation today, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Mahek. Today, we turn our focus to a topic that is at the heart of ensuring patient safety and product integrity, quality risk management, or as it is known as QRM. As the pharmaceutical industry evolves, managing risk effectively across the entire life cycle from lab to patient, it is becoming increasingly more and more critical. Our session today will explore how QRM enables organizations to identify, access, control, communicate, and review quality risks, ensuring regulatory compliance and safeguarding patient trust. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Raman Srinivasan, our distinguished speaker for today. Mr. Raman Srinivasan is a seasoned biotech professional with over 3 decades of experience spanning R&D, manufacturing, operations, and technology leadership in the biopharmaceutical industry. He currently serves as the independent tech ops consultant with Biocon Biologics, following an extensive tenure at Biocon, where he led biologics manufacturing science and technology, MSNT division, and oversaw large-scale manufacturing operations in India and Malaysia for therapeutic proteins, monoclonal antibodies, and medical devices. Before joining Biocon, he headed process development and scale-up fermentation R&D at Ranbaxy Laboratories, focusing on fermentation-based pharmaceuticals. Mr. Srinivasan is deeply engaged in professional bodies such as the Parenteral Drug Association and is also a board member of the Biopharmaceutical Advisory Board. He is also an active member of the International Society for Pharmaceutical Engineers, ISPE. We are delighted to have him with us today to share both strategic perspectives and practical lessons. Again, a very warm welcome, Mr. Srinivasan, and over to you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much. Firstly, I would like to thank Ahmedabad University Gemba team, to invite me on this platform, the webinar series, which brings, I've seen, actionable insights to pharma professionals across the country, right? It's my privilege today to share my experience and thoughts around the quality risk management in the pharmaceutical industry. QRM, of course, is a vast topic, and as Srini pointed out, it's all the way from early development until product discontinuation, so to say. So we will try to explore the topic together. I'm sure at the end of the presentation, you will have more questions than answers, and if that is the case, I would think we have served our purpose. Yeah. Let me share my presentation. Just let me know once you are able to see the screen.
Yes.
We can see it.
Are you able to? You can see the presentation? Okay. Okay. So we will definitely look at today the ICHQ9, one of the primary resources for pharmaceutical quality risk management, as well as ISO 14971 specific for the medical devices. Okay. In addition to these two, we will also focus on some of the guidances which are generic in nature, but they offer a lot more fundamental concepts and information around the concept of risk and risk management. Okay. And that will provide a better understanding of the subject. So I would like to start with the pharmaceutical quality system, because the quality risk management is a constituent of the pharmaceutical quality system. So I will start there. And any pharmaceutical organization will have top three objectives, right? Achieve product realization, that's taking the product all the way from lab to the market. And while doing so, establish and maintain a state of control and facilitate continual improvement. Now, these are not my words, these are actually from the ICH Q10 guidance, uh, which talks about all the stages starting from pharmaceutical development, uh, technology transfer, commercial manufacturing, product discontinuation, all the way to the end of the product life cycle. And it complements the GMPs, right? There are regional GMPs, global GMPs. It complements the GMPs. It doesn't add any new requirement, but it offers guidance on how you can use the pharmaceutical quality system to to comply, right? And any management has a responsibility to direct the affairs of the company. And this guidance, ICHQ10, is a guidance for the management specifically for quality. Okay. And of course, the as per the ICHQ10 model, there are four QMS elements. Process performance, product quality, monitoring system, CAPA system, change management, and management review. And these four elements are applied across all the four life cycle stages, and it leads to the achieving these objectives. But what is more interesting for us today are the enablers. As you can see, knowledge management and quality risk management are the basic enablers. So now when I say enabler, it's a business process, right? It's not a compliance tool, it's a business process. It is needed if you want to succeed, right? Knowledge management, of course, is a systematic way of handling knowledge. How do you acquire knowledge? How do you maintain? How do you disseminate, right? That's the knowledge management. The science behind the processes, all of it comes under the knowledge management, process understanding, and product understanding. And the second enabler is the quality risk management, uh, which, of course, uh, is a way of managing the operations, whatever you do, with a risk based thinking. Okay. Now, for this, we need to understand a few terms around risk. Okay. Let's try to do that in the next few slides. Uh, let's talk about hazard and harm, right? Now, I want to start with some fundamentals because these terms are used very interchangeably. And before going into the principles of QRM, I want to bring all of us on the same page with some terminologies. A hazard is a potential source of harm. It can be an action, it can be a thing, it can be an activity. It is a potential source of harm. It need not bring harm yet, right? So a hazard is a potential source of harm. And whatever we do in life it's a hazard, right? Driving is a hazard. Having a surgery is a hazard. But not all of it leads to harm. So what you need is a circumstance which is called an hazardous situation to bring the hazard and the impacted closer, right? So it's an environment when the exposure happens, then you have an hazardous situation. Now, even now, hazardous situation need not result in a harm, right? So it's still there is a likelihood of happening. Now, if hazard and the hazardous situation come together, and if they result in a harm, that is injury or damage to either health of an individual people or damage to property or the environment. These are generic terms which are around the risk, right? And so these three, we will explore these relations, interrelationship together to understand the terms better. Now let's move on to the concept of risk, right? The key definitions for risk. Now, whenever we talk about a harm, it could be a small injury, right? Maybe a scratch in the arm or something like that, or it could mean devastation or death or catastrophe if you talk about general situation. So there is a gradation of severity of the consequence of an hazard. So there is a severity element uh, to a hazard, and there is another likelihood element, which is a chance of something happening or the probability of occurrence of the harm. Now, it depends on a lot of situations, right? So it depends on the people, their training and environment, process, equipment, past history. It's a multitude of factors that lead to a likelihood or a probability. Now, when you combine the severity and likelihood, and then you have the risk, and the risk is nothing but the effect of uncertainty on the objectives. Now, here we are specifically talking about objective of health of a patient. Uncertainty is all the way when you start developing the product, manufacturing the product, reaching the product to the patient, when the patient is using it, all the way through there are hazards. Now, what is the likelihood of those hazards coming along, creating some hazardous situations and resulting in a risk, right? So the combination of the probability of occurrence of harm and the severity of the harm, that is a risk. This is one of the most basic equations in risk: the likelihood of occurrence and the severity of the consequences, right? And moving on, I also would like to talk about some fundamental concepts around this. As you can see here, I'm using the some of the material from ISO 14971. You can see that the flow chart shows how a hazard results in a harm through hazardous situations. This is what we spoke about, right? So one hazard can create multiple hazardous situations, and one hazardous situations can create multiple harms, and each one might have different probabilities, and each one will have different severities, right? So I wanted to use this 14971 examples to illustrate the terms hazard and harm and what happens in between, right? Let's look at one of the examples. Now, this example is where a patient is using an infusion pump, which delivers insulin to control his diabetes. So the functionality, if there is no delivery, then that is going to be an hazard, right? And if that hazard somehow were to happen in a harm, the harm will be probably a minor organ damage or a decreased consciousness, which is a localized effect. But how it can happen, one of the potential modes, right? You can see some of the events that can happen. Maybe the patient is electrostatically charged due to the weather or clothes or whatever, and he touches the pump and the pump alarms fail and the pump also fails. And the hazardous situation is failure to deliver the insulin, right? So here you can see how a hazard, through a sequence of events, bring about a hazardous situation that results in harm, right? Now look at the next one. Here, the situation is about an implanted defibrillator for heart condition, right? Now here again, we are saying if that doesn't function, if there is no output from there, that is a hazard. Now, in the normal course of use, the battery reaches the end of its useful life. And there are ways to regain the battery life, and that happens only if you visit the hospital. So if there is an inappropriately long interval, which is a sequence of events, right? So this is the normal course of event, this is an abnormal situation, but the result is defibrillator cannot deliver the shock when an arrhythmia occurs. So, and then this actually this can result in the death of a patient. So this sort of concludes the concept around the hazardous situation and harm, and how through a sequence of events or a single event the hazard can result in a harm, right? Now I think we are ready now to look at the quality risk management basis specifically for pharma. And you can see the harm now is defined as damage to health, including the damage that can occur from loss of product quality or availability. So here we are focusing our attention to the patient. The harm is to the patient. And as all pharmaceutical professionals, we know the definition of quality. It's the product should deliver the intended outcome, right? Whether it is a process, whether it is a product system, they need to fulfill certain requirements. And risk, we just saw the combination of probability of occurrence of harm and the severity of that harm, right? And then management is a general definition. We spoke about it earlier. It's directing and controlling the affairs of the organization. And the quality risk management, as per the ICHQ-9, the definition is a systematic process for the assessment, control, communication, and review of risks. We will talk about each of these terms in the subsequent slides, but a structured or a systematic way of doing across the entire product life cycle, and that is quality risk management, right? Now, even though we are focusing on ICHQ-9 and ISO 14971, I will also use some of the concepts presented in ISO 31000, 31010, and 24971 to illustrate some basic concepts. Yeah. Now, as for the ICHQ-9, there are two fundamental primary principles. Even though I quote ICHQ-9, which was published in November 2005, the quality risk management was followed for several decades. Only thing is, we didn't have a formal declaration of it, which started happening since Q9 first version was published in 2005. And over the past 20 years, we have learned a lot based on the application of QRM. Regulators have learned a lot. And there was a new version of ICHQ-9 that was published in January 2023. It has certain learnings incorporated back into the process. And whatever we are talking today is using the 2023 version of the ICHQ-9. Now, the two basic primary principles. One is, of course, the quality risk management's top goal is protection of the patient. And how do you do protection of the patient? By managing risks. And how do you manage the risk is based on the scientific knowledge, right? So that's where the knowledge management comes in. So it is a scientific way of addressing all the risks so that the patient is protected, right? And the second principle is whatever efforts we put in quality risk management, that should commensurate with the level of risk. See, this is a very, very important aspect because when you say level of effort commensurate with level of risk, two instances which I spoke about earlier, two examples that we saw, you don't have to apply the same level of efforts if the risk is minimal. At the same time, you are forced to divert your resources to where the risk is maximum. That means the risk-based thinking and the risk-based decisions that are allowed by these guidelines helps you to maximize our resources. We allocate our resources more optimally, right? It's the same case whether it is documentation or formality. Now, formality is an independent topic. I have a separate slide on that. We will speak about it in a while. But the way the QRM works, it supports informed decision making to protect patient safety in a compliant manner. Right now, let's understand what are the process steps for QRM. Once again, let me use the ICH-Q9 model of the quality risk management process. It has certain steps, and on the right side, you will find the ISO 14971. It also has some steps. If you look closely, there are minor variations in grouping and some wordings, but the backbone of the quality risk management process steps are exactly the same. So for the benefit, in the middle, I'm putting, the the specific steps that we need to go through. You will comply both of Q9 as well as 14971 requirements. The first, we do a risk assessment where we ask some fundamental questions. What can go wrong? What might go wrong? What are the consequences if things go wrong? And what is the likelihood or probability if things go wrong, right? Those, we spoke about the risk. So the risk assessment is identification of hazards, analyze the risks involved, and evaluate the risk. Now, the risk evaluation compares the identified and analyzed risk against a given risk criteria. Now, the risk criteria is predefined either through laws or regulations or the company policy. So, against which we see what is the level of risks, what is the severity of the risk. When we get all this information, we move to the next step, right? Now, the outcome of the risk assessment step is actually either a quantitative estimate of risk or a qualitative description of the range of risk. This is what you have at this end, right? Now, what happens next? Now, when you assess this against your acceptance criteria, then you say, okay, as per our policy or as per this regulation, as per this guideline, this is acceptable. So I don't have to do anything. I accept the risk. Now, there are several time situations that the risk is not acceptable. And then what you do is you have to take some measures to reduce the risk or mitigate the impact or eliminate the risk, whatever you want to do. And then you see whether you have reached the accepted level. That's why you see this, recycle loop here. So if you have an unacceptable risk, you go back, apply some reduction measures and go back and see, and then come back again to see if you have reached the right level of acceptance. Now, once you have accepted a residual risk, then you keep on doing risk review because risks can change over time, right? So the idea is when you see whether your controls work, and when you run a process or when you use a device at the end of a patient, you keep on getting new information. The risk review, what it does is it checks your risk control measures are working, and it also getting you back further information, new knowledge. And then you flow back this new knowledge into this. So the idea is over a period of time, with a better scientific understanding, risks are very well controlled, right? And the last step is the risk communication. As you can see, the risk communication happens throughout the entire process with relevant stakeholders. Now, this risk communication is also a very important concept. I feel it merits a separate discussion. So I have a dedicated slide on that also. And now we said we will do all this. We have to do this risk assessment, risk analysis, risk control. So what are the tools available for it, right? Let's say what ICH-Q9 talks about. It talks about a few tools. Okay, I'm just going to list them all here. And first, it starts with gathering information, flow charts, check sheets, process mapping, cause effect diagrams like Ishikawa diagrams. So, and then some deeper level of analysis, failure mode effects analysis, FMECA, and additional fault tree analysis, right? And then the tools that were typically from the safety domain, which are being used in pharmaceutical domains today, are the HACCP study, a HAZOP, or a preliminary hazard analysis. All of these tools have certain capabilities and they can be deployed to conduct the quality risk management process steps, right? Risk ranking and filtering is another tool. Now, uh, quality risk management is largely based on data, right? It's scientific. You need data. You need principles behind it, theory and data. So any data that you gather together, if you can do a statistical analysis and those parameters are used in the assessment, then it makes the QRM a very robust process. These are some of the supporting tools that are suggested in the ICH-Q9, the Pareto charts, process capability analysis, all types of control charts, right? Now, one might ask, so many tools are there. Yes, these are not just a comprehensive list as ICH-Q9 claims. There is a standard IEC 31010, which is specifically on tools, risk management tools. This proposes more than 30 tools, right? Now, the benefit is it actually suggests on the risk identification, risk analysis, risk evaluation, risk for each of these, which tool I will use. So the numbers here represent the name of the tool. You can see here, the FMEA and brainstorming for initial analysis. So this document actually tells us which tool is useful for which step of the process, right? And how do you select the tool, right? There's so many tools are there and they can be used in more than one places. And the same document gives us some guidelines. It helps us choose a structured process to select a tool, right? So each tool has a unique set of characteristics, and based on those characteristics, each tool can be categorized. And this categorization helps in tool selection for different stages of risk assessment. Given the paucity of time, we won't go into the exact way of tool selection. But what I've done is I've chosen a few tools and techniques that are suggested in ICH-Q9, and I have pulled out based on the IEC 31010 recommendation on each tool can be used for which stage of the risk assessment process, right? So SA is strongly applicable, A is applicable, NA is not useful, right? So you can see here, Ishikawa diagram, you can identify risks. It's strongly applicable. It's a very good tool. And it can also assess consequences, but there are better tools for assessing consequences. So what happens is when you understand more about the tool selection, you are able to understand their capabilities and choose the right tool for each step of the risk assessment process, right? Now, you can see here FMECA is a very versatile tool. You see that it can be used in almost all stages here, right? Strongly applicable. Now, there is a IEC standard 60812, which covers only FMEA and FMECA. It talks about principles behind this tool, steps in analysis, example documentation, example applications. So if you want to know more about these two tools, you don't have to look anywhere else. Just pick up IEC 60812 and you understand all of this, right? Today, of course, there are many automated tools, digital quality management tools are available today. And these digital tools help you run the process very smoothly. However, an understanding of the tool is still needed, right? It's like you have a lot of statistical uh, Minitab and other tools available, but if you lack a knowledge of statistics and how to use it, then you may not be able to use effectively the tools available, right? So understanding the tool, what is its capability, what are its limitations, those are very important in selecting the right tool for the right step, right? So I told you two things that I want to talk about. One is the level of formality and the risk communication. One of the second principles in ICH Q9 said that the level of formality has to match the level of the risk, right? So it elaborates on three factors: uncertainty, importance, and complexity. So if the uncertainty is high, there is a high level of formality when you do a QRM exercise. Importance is high. So uncertainty, when uncertainty high actually means you have limited knowledge around the risk, limited knowledge around the system that you are studying. It can be a new product for the company. It can be a new mechanism of treating a disease. So these are the situations when you have limited knowledge, either within the group or as an industry also. So these are the cases where you need higher level of formality. In the same way, the importance is high when the decisions relate to the product quality. Complexity is any complex system that you are trying to analyze for risks. Obviously, you need a more structured way, a formal way of conducting a QRM. So what does it mean, the level of formality? How does it look, right? Now, let's see. These are some of the factors for higher level of formality. Now, we saw the different steps in the quality risk management process, right? So all parts of the quality risk management process are explicitly performed with standalone reports. When you have higher level, this is what is the higher level of formality. And you use the QRM tools in some or all parts of the process. And usually a cross-functional team is assembled because you need multidisciplinary inputs. And the last one, which is very interesting, not only subject matter experts on science and technology, but you also use sometimes subject matter experts on quality risk management. So there are people who are very familiar with the tools. They can guide the team in which tool to use, how to use a tool, what are the pitfalls in a tool, and how do you avoid them. Even if you choose the right tool, when you use the tool, if you have some kind of deficiencies, you will still have a problem. So you will find in a very high level of formality, you will also use a QRM SME as a facilitator, right? As against it, you can see the lower level of formality. Obviously, these are all kind of diluted, and you may not have individual reports. You may still capture them in your relevant parts of the quality system, but there need not be individual reports. A CFT may not be there, and QRM tools might not be used in every step, or some steps could be skipped because this is lower level of formality, right? Now, what does this do? Once the level is decided, right, based on uncertainty, importance, and complexity, you can allocate your resources, right? And this is not 0 to 1. It's not that I use either this or this. There could be combinations in between. It's more like a continuum. So here again, the level of formality, linking it with the level of risk, brings a lot of flexibility, and at the same time, flexibility to use the resources or allocate the resources to where it matters. And that's the power of this risk-based decision making process. And the next topic which I wanted to specially cover is the risk communication. So risk communication happens between, of course, several stakeholders. It could be internal, external. For example, you have we are as manufacturers, and patients, regulators, industry as a whole, and the doctors, nurses, and the paramedics. So this is the kind of communication channels that are available. It's not that we need to communicate every time. Any risk acceptance or any risk decision need not be communicated all the time, but depending on the criticality, and if the stakeholders play a role in either understanding or even mitigating, and that's where the communication becomes important. So what do you communicate? You communicate existence of the risk, the nature, form, probability, severity, what is accepted, what controls and treatments are available, can it be detected, so we can pick up some examples. Let's say between regulator and manufacturers, there are many times we delivered a product to the market, we find there is some issue, but we are not sure if the product is affected. Then we take a quality risk management exercise and communicate that to the regulators. There are standard channels available when you want to do that between the manufacturer and regulator, and you do that, and then together you can come to take a call whether you have to recall the batch or you can let it stay. And but the important point is you are communicating at the right time, right? And let's say between the manufacturers. So what happens here is, supposing you have some side effects of a drug and or contraindications of the drug, and the doctor needs to know that you provide based on the label claims, right? So I think the idea is aware of the potential risk information and play their part in preventing or mitigating the impact of the risk which is under their influence, right? So both the risk communication and the formality, they play a very critical role. Now let's look at the potential applications of QRM, right? Again, I will use ICH-Q9. All the life cycle, integrated quality management, regulatory operations, development. For example, you have a quality target product profile and you link CQAs and CPPs. So all of this, when we do, we prevent downstream failures, right? Because we attend to the risks before. And facility, equipment, utilities. Now commissioning, robust commissioning is possible with the least amount of resources when you deploy risk-based principles, right? Now, there are certain guidelines from ISPE available for this, which give you further insights on how you can use QRM in qualification of facilities, and process equipment, right? Material management, of course, I've seen many times exceptions, right? You have a quarantine situation. Can I use it? Can I go to the next step? Now, quality risk management helps you to assess. Please remember, this is not a justification to proceed, but it is a genuine assessment to see whether I can proceed or not, right? But then you document those. If you find your assessment is acceptable, and if you document it, you will be able to defend your decision tomorrow, either in an audit or even internally with your internal stakeholders, right? So like this, you have in production, of course, You have the responding to deviations, conducting investigations. Similarly, laboratory controls, OAS handling, batch disposition, all are based on quality risk management, right? Packaging and labeling, for example. You must have seen child-proof packings, different colored ones, so that the patients can recognize which medicine they are taking. These are all coming from imagining what risk could happen or what error could happen at the patient's end, and how can we protect the patient, right? And that's where the thought process starts. But then it leads to including anti-counterfeit measures. All of this comes, from a risk-based approach, right? Supply chain control, cold chain, even product recalls, whether you are ready for that. And in the case of devices, right, the product life cycle is slightly different. It has some additional elements. For example, after you distribute, the product stays in the hands of the patient for a longer time. For example, if a device is used for 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, so there is an element of safety to the patient when he uses. Even when he uses normally, there could be situations, right? So you account for these as a part of risks, and use that information to tell the patient that these are the risks involved, and what role he can play in mitigating the risk while taking the product, right? So overall, a QRM plays a role in patient safety, product quality, and process reliability over the entire product or the device lifetime, right? And um, I said in the beginning that anything that we do has a risk. So when you do a QRM, when you apply QRM, when you are practicing QRM, there are also risks, right? So I have listed a few risks which I have personally come across, that if you don't identify all the hazards, or if your quantification or qualification of the risk is poor, your risk control step will not be effective, right? And if you overcomplify the efforts, then you are wasting your efforts, right? There is a risk that is not high, but you are complicating the risk assessment and the risk controls, which is not necessary, right? And obviously you need to involve all the stakeholders. Sometimes we don't, and that way we can miss the comprehensiveness of the exercise. And the last but not the least, the lack of regular review of risk assessment. Now this is very important, because risks can change over time, either due to technology changes or changes in the business environment. And that's why failing to regularly review and update risk assessments is also a very, very key aspect of keeping the current, uh, effective risk management all the time when you practice quality risk management. Yeah. So I have listed some of the guidances which I used in this presentation for your ready reference. And these are the known ones: ICH Q9 and 14971. The TR24971 is also very good. It expands on the 14971, right? And you also have, these are the other documents that I was talking about, general risk management. They explain the concepts in more detail, and definitely you will get more fundamental understanding which you can deploy when you use tools as per these guidances, right? And from the industry bodies, right, the PDA technical report 54, it is in 6 parts, and it has wonderful examples, covering case studies and packaging, manufacturing of drug product, drug substance, excipients. This is more process focused. And the ISPE has got a few guidances, which are more facility focused. So I think these guidances sort of help us understand the concept of QRM better and help us build the risk-based thinking as a way of life and cultivate a QRM culture within our own respective professional sphere, right? Sometimes you are able to influence, the organization's behavior, but it starts with the individual, right? So we start thinking in a risk-based approach, and we cultivate a QRM culture, within our sphere of work. So thank you. That's the introduction I wanted to provide today. I'm sure you will have more questions, but that's the idea. And the topic is also too vast. But there are very many resources, to understand and apply these effectively. And it is all to the patient safety and in an affordable way. That's how I see this. Yeah. So we can take any question and answers, if you
Sure.
have.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mr. Srinivas, for that
Yeah.
very insightful presentation. It beautifully captured how QRM goes beyond, compliance and truly protects patients through structured and science-based decision making. I think that was very important. Let's now move to the Q&A segment, like you mentioned, and to explore some practical aspects of QRM further. I'd like to start this Q&A session off with a few questions that I have. You talked about quite some detail about the QRM tools, such as FTA, HACCP, FMECA, and also the IEC 31010 that talks about the applicability of over 30 such tools. Now,
Yeah.
what is the importance of tool selection in quality risk management, and how should teams approach making this choice or making the right choice?
Yeah, that's a very important aspect, right? I think we had a slide on the tool selection. What happens is, when you select a tool, every tool has its pros and cons. And if the users are not familiar and use the wrong tool for the wrong application, or the right tool for the right application but not in the right manner, then it doesn't lead to the objective of uh, maximizing our efforts in reducing the risk, right? So I think it's important to consider the three aspects of UIC: the uncertainty, importance, and the complexity whenever you choose the tool. And I also spoke about the 31010 model of characterization of the tools. In fact, if you were to go back and look at the document, it lists more than 30 tools, and it nicely tables that which all tools can be used in identification, which all tools in risk evaluation, which all tools can be used in likelihood assessment. So I think uh, it's a wonderful question. Tool selection is very important. The only way to do it is use a structured method and follow these guidelines, right? And please ask. There are experts available to if you are stuck with some solution towards a solution, then you can take those expert helps, definitely.
Sure. I have a quick request, Mr. Srinivasan. May I request you to stop sharing your presentation so, we
Yeah.
can. Oh,
Okay.
thank you so much. And now I see a lot of questions, that are in the chat box. So I think I'm going to switch over to the audience and
Yeah.
request them to, help us ask some of the questions that have already come.
Sure.
Yes. So we have a question by you, Suyash, in the chat. How do you see AI and data analytics in enhancing QRM, especially in predicting manufacturing risk or CAPA effectiveness?
Yeah. So, very good question. AI has got impact on all walks of life, right? I know there are already digital QRM systems available today. Some of them do use AI already, right? There are 2 points to it. One, AI's help will definitely be useful where you have predictive analytics. That's one of the specialities of AI, the predictive analytics that can come out of usage of AI. And second, the real-time monitoring and updation, right? So it is like a clock ticking. You have the quality risk management parameters being thrown at you. So only one caution I have here: the use of AI itself for the CGMP applications are evolving. The guidances, right? For example, EU has come out with the Annex 22 for consultation now. It's the use of AI systems for CGMP application, right? And US FDA published a guideline both for devices and for products, and they are not firm yet. They also came up for commenting public comments, and as a part of PDA and ISPE, we have provided comments back to the agency. And so if you want to use them formally in within the pharmaceutical quality system, you may have to wait a longer, not very long, I suppose, but I see a lot of benefit coming through the use of AI, because it is science and data based decision making. And I'm sure AI can bring us, distill a lot of these things to us. And then once you address the typical issues of the AI, the bias and transparency, which are happening now, using these guidances, I'm sure, it will definitely help in a better quality risk management.
Yeah, there's a follow-up question also by him again. How does QRM integrate with pharmacovigilance and post-marketing safety signals?
Yes, see, it actually, let me put it this way. It starts with the feedback from the market, right? We spoke about either the market complaints, or if you're in a pharmacovigilance setting, either for a clinical trial or for post approval. uh, we are trying to again gather the data, analyze the data, and see whether these risks are linked to the product or to the usage of the patients. Again, all the learnings that we receive during the development comes handy. Those were created using the tools of quality risk management, right? And there is also a consolidation happening already. uh, the MedDRA guidance, the classification of all these pharmacovigilance complaints sort of codes each complaint that is understandable or a common standard. So the data analysis becomes very easy. So the quality risk management is also about the continuous improvement, right? Whether it is in the manufacturing setting or whether it is in the patient setting. And these are the new knowledge or new science that gets developed, which gets flowed back into the our knowledge cycle. And that's where it helps in refining and reducing risks going forward. So I see that being used very extensively in pharmacovigilance, both in post-marketing setting and as well as clinical setting.
Ma'am, you're on.
Sorry, I was on mute. I see there's another question from the audience.
Yeah,
How?
this is by
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, by Anshika. She's asking, with so many QRM tools available from FMEA to HACCP and Fall 3 analysis, how can teams align tool selection with different stages of the product life cycle?
Yes, I think we touched upon this a little earlier, but I can, again go back to that. See, the idea is to choose the tool which has the capability to provide the outcome needed from that step, right? So we said there are 5 steps, starting with the risk identification and the risk analysis, which comprises of the likelihood occurrence and the level of risk, and the last one, risk evaluation. So the choosing the tool, uh, using a structured process, and making sure that you don't have the pitfalls that I explained while using the tool, right? So these two are important. First, the choice of tool, and the question asked is how. I would strongly recommend look at 31010, even though it's not specifically for pharma. It is for all industries. It is industry agnostic, but it gives you a structured way of choosing a tool, right? So use such guidances if you are in doubt about which to choose. If you look at ICH-Q9, and if you look at ISO 14971, they also provide, when they describe the tool, they also tell you where it is typically applied, right? But I think our intent is not to use only those tools. You may want to use additional tools. And when you want to do that, it may be good to arrive in a structured manner, in a systematic manner, to verify the applicability of a tool for a particular step in the quality risk management process.
We're almost at the end of time, but there's another question in the chat board from Palak. She asks if the residual risk is unacceptable at the stage of risk evaluation and further risk reduction is not feasible. How should organizations proceed?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So you are basically stuck, right? So the idea is, you want to bring the risk to an acceptable level so that you can proceed to the next step. But if you are not there yet, then what do we do, right? So one of the options, that is given in the ISO TR 24971 is to do a risk benefit analysis. So what you do is, okay, I have a certain risk and it doesn't meet today at the given situation. Then what I do is I go back and do a risk benefit analysis. If this were the risk, how do I use it for the patient, right? Now you look at, if the benefits that the patient will get, if it outweighs the risks, then document your risk acceptance with the rationale and communicate the residual risk to the stakeholders and proceed. For example, if you take an injection, obviously there is going to be pain while you take the injection, or potential contamination around the site, but you take that risk and proceed, because the benefit of taking the medicine is it outweighs the risks of the minor pains that it takes, right? Same way the side effects. So whenever you are stuck with this situation, one option is to do is the risk benefit analysis. If the benefits outweigh risks, you go ahead. But if the evidence doesn't support the conclusion that the benefits outweigh the risks, then you have to modify either the process or the device or the intended use to eliminate the risk, because the risk remains unacceptable. So then what you do is you go one step further and you modify something and then go back to the step one. Okay, I use this needle, I have to change this needle now to a smaller one so that it doesn't affect, for example, right? So you make tangible changes in the process or otherwise in the product, to bring the risk to an acceptable level. Yeah. So risk benefit analysis is probably the first way to go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Jain, I know we are at the end, and I would like, before closing, I want to ask one last question that's been on my mind.
Yeah.
What, in your opinion, is the most common pitfall organizations face when implementing QRM, such as cognitive bias or overcomplication, and how can these be avoided?
Yeah, I think sometimes uh, the QRM efforts, they come in bits and pieces, right? You will find one of the pitfalls is not having an overarching policy. So it has to start with a quality risk management policy, and then the policy gets percolated down into whatever the organization does, and it takes its place in the respective SOPs, which is the operational level, right? So if you don't have that top down approach, if it comes in bits and pieces, we actually don't do a we won't be able to do a comprehensive job. So the idea is, in fact, the 14971 is much better. It's more clear than Q9 in this aspect. It nicely tells you, how do you have a quality risk management plan? How do you maintain a quality risk management file? What are the things that you need there? So the idea is predefine what you would do or what you should do for different scenarios, and how do you make QRM a way of life. So this is one pitfall I've seen, not having a quality policy at the policy level, not having a clear policy for QRM. The second one I would say is for the uh, not looking at it continuously, right? Because I think we spoke about in another question, the risks change with time. And if you don't do the risk review when things change, right? Someone asked a question about pharmacovigilance. You have a market complaint coming back. That tells you something. Maybe it's the risk that you hadn't thought about earlier. So always the risk assessments are live, and you put back new knowledge and then refine your system. So I would say, that is another major pitfall I've seen, that will not let us take the full benefit of QRM.
Absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. So this has been a very rich and highly relevant conversation. And on behalf of Ahmedabad University and all of us here today, I'd like to extend our heartfelt thanks to you, Mr. Raman Srinivasan, for sharing your time, knowledge, and practical insights on QRM.
Sure.
And also a big thank you to all the participants for your active engagement. And if you would like to learn more about our Global Executive MBA in Pharmaceutical Management program, please reach out to our admissions team and, over a one-on-one conversation or a call. And once again, thank you, Mr. Srinivasan. It was a pleasure
Well, thank
having
you. I
you.
am very happy to be on this platform, sharing my experience and thoughts. Thank you so much for this
Absolutely.
opportunity.
It was our pleasure. And we
Yeah.
wish all of you a very great evening ahead. Thank you so much.
And thanks, big thanks to the participants to be on this call on a Saturday evening. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.